listening to B2B Tech Talk with Ingram Micro, the place to learn about new technology and technological advances before they become mainstream. This podcast is sponsored by Ingram Micro's Imagine Next. It's not about the destination. It's about going someplace you never thought possible. Go to imaginenext.ingrammicro.com to find out more. Let's get into it.
Welcome to B2B Tech Talk with Ingram Micro. I'm your host, Shelby Skrhak, and our guests today are Carol Wright, Senior Technology Consultant at Ingram Micro, John McNelly, Senior Consultant 2 for Ingram Micro, and Dave Nentarz, Systems Architect for Cisco. Carol, Dave, and John, welcome.
Thank you very much.
Hello. Hello, Shelby.
Thank you, Shelby.
Excellent. Well, today we are talking about Cisco Intersight, but first let's get some context then. So, Dave, what is Cisco Intersight? Is it a new offering? Is it something that people may not be as familiar with, but it might be getting a higher profile coming up?
Yeah, sure. Shelby, thanks for having me on the podcast. I appreciate that. So when we talk about Cisco Intersight and, its origins, we have to almost go back to two different times. One origin was, it was kind of modeled after the success of our Meraki offering. Right? If you're familiar with the Meraki offering, you're familiar with the Meraki dashboard, where all of the configuration and intelligence is done in a public cloud. And then that information and that configuration, those policies and the complete configuration is pushed down to access points or switches or firewalls or video cameras that are on premise at a individual customer's environment. It was a very successful model, and, the customers and the marketplace has responded by driving Meraki growth, many, 4 or 5 times over. And so that same model is really around what Cisco Intersight is platformed on, right? Where it is a public cloud SaaS offering, and it is a configuration and operational platform that is completely managed and delivered by Cisco and supported by Cisco. And customers just consume it. And we're adding new features into Cisco Intersight, every week or every other Thursday. It started out in 2015 as a tech preview type of product. It was actually called Project Starfish back then. And customers were able to just access it and play around with it and see if they like this, SaaS-based offering model. It removes a lot of the resources needed on premise and moves them to the public cloud, so customers don't have to worry about the management of their infrastructure. In 2017, we actually relabeled it Cisco Intersight, and then that's when it became a actual product on the Cisco line card. It's tax supported in a subscription format, and we've seen some great adoption. So it's new in the fact that there are new features dropped all the time, and even some major modules like Intersight Workload Optimizer that was introduced in 2020. So we're constantly innovating inside that public cloud environment for the operational platform of Intersight. But, it's been around since a good 7 years, and it's been a product for 5 years. And we're not going to slow down in the future with our innovation that we drop into Intersight.
Yeah, well, Meraki has become a household name, but, Intersight. So this is a SaaS-based public cloud, operations or dashboard then. So as I understand that then, and it's been around since 2015, I do understand that it has new capabilities, though, that weren't around. I mean, you're releasing new capabilities all the time, but I guess what is vastly different between the Intersight of old and Intersight today? And Carol, I'll ask you that.
Certainly. And like Dave said, when Starship came out in 2015, and then it was renamed to Intersight in 2017, partners that started adopting it early, they enjoyed services revenues that they normally weren't able to achieve at that time. And, there's new products that it's mandatory for, such as UCSX and M7 servers that are coming out next year. But there's so many things that they can do with like the advantage tier of licensing, such as doing an operating system install. advisories from TAC, doing storage inventory, launching a virtual KVM session, and even third-party server management. We're going to, in current feature preview, you can manage Dell PowerEdge and HP ProLiant Redfish servers. So there's a lot of new features, as Dave mentioned, that are always coming out, and we're expecting, more product features to come out in the very foreseeable future. But it's growing so fast, and everyone was used to, typical direct connection to the data center. You had an Ethernet connection at your desktop or your laptop. And now everybody's used to traditional, cell phones. You don't connect to the data center. But the IT, we're still connected to that physical connection. With the cloud, they're able to connect wherever they are and manage their server inventory, their networking, and storage capabilities through the Intersight dashboard. So it gives them a lot of flexibility.
So, John, let me ask you, is Intersight, I guess, more geared for larger businesses with a pretty good sized IT department, or would it be appropriate for SMBs? I mean, I guess how big a lift is it for a company's IT department?
Yeah, Shelby, that's a great question. I think a lot of the things that both Dave and Carol have touched on thus far really kind of highlights how this Intersight is appropriate for all size organizations, not just enterprise level. So we're looking at, from a lift perspective, this is a SaaS-based solution. So this is something where both from a partner revenue model, as well as from moving from an on-prem self-managed infrastructure platform, which is what we're calling this now. We really want to identify Intersight as a platform insofar as that it can be kind of as small as you need it to be all the way up to super large enterprise. It gives you the opportunity to deploy easily, quickly. You don't really need to have a lot of in-house expertise around management solution management. What you need to have is the ability to, get access to the internet. And then no matter where your infrastructure is in the entire world, then Intersight will be able to take a look at that infrastructure and then do everything from kind of basic monitoring and management up through deployment, all the way up through, if we wanted to look at DevOps, as well as server ops and even networking operations coming up in the future. It can really be as small and niche at the edge as it needs to be, all the way up through large enterprise deployments that are covering, as Carol mentioned, multi-platform, where we can look at other vendor activities, as well as the ability to monitor just a kind of a soup to nuts infrastructure. And we can, in a further session, talk a little bit about how the Nexus platform will get pulled into that in the future as well. So yeah, I think it's appropriate for all enterprises. And I think it should be looked at as something in the small enterprise as a way to shorten that learning curve to get into UCS as a platform.
Well, I think that's a good point there, shortening that learning curve, because we know that talent is scarce, and with many people doing multiple things and wearing multiple hats, it can be difficult to find somebody that maybe specializes in one thing or another. I guess just following up on what you said about it being good for both SMBs and larger organizations, where does that expertise need to lie? How much expertise do you need to have in order to run Intersight?
Certainly. I think the base level is actually, it's pretty simple. Like if, we can do demos, we can show people kind of how to do the initial setup and configuration and leverage profiles and things like that. But, it can run the gambit from, if you want NetOps, server ops, cloud ops, DevOps, all of that can be kind of rolled into this architecture, this platform, so to speak. But if you just needed to move to a simplified single pane of glass that will even make recommendations, there's a recommendation engine available within Intersight. It can really kind of simplify and streamline some of that hybrid cloud modernization that we're looking at. So even small organizations that are looking to try to understand what the economy of scale looks like between on-prem data center and moving to a cloud infrastructure or blending that together, Intersight can help them make those decisions and make appropriate business decisions based on kind of the economics of it all, not just simply, hey, this is where our area of expertise was previously. Let's look to the future and see how we can leverage these technologies to move our business forward.
Carol, so let's talk a little bit more about Intersight's benefits. So, we know it lets you control everything from servers to containers. It's identified as a platform, but why use Intersight? I guess what sets it apart?
And Just to tie into some of the things that Dave and John have said, one of the huge benefits is, for the small business that may have a Cisco partner managing their infrastructure, this gives the partner insight into what's going on. You get, the stoplight type, dashboard where you can see red, green, yellow, anything that needs to be addressed. There's best practices that are brought into it from Cisco TAC for all their years and, vast knowledge of the product. But it'll also proactively give them insight if something's going to fail. They can dynamically send a replacement before it even fails and before the end user or the, IT department even realizes it's failing. It gives them so much more insight, and that integration directly into Cisco TAC is just one of those huge benefits.
Well, so Dave, let's talk about kind of what's coming next for Cisco Intersight. You mentioned that those updates are happening continuously. What's coming down the pike?
Well, the list is long and wide. I'm happy to say that. But let me just highlight some of the top things that are coming up in the next several months. First of all, we've introduced a new UI about a week ago, and that new graphic look for the product is simpler. It's easier to read, and we're consolidating and views and looks on some of our cloud platforms to have consistency across this Cisco portfolio. So there's multiple reasons for the new UI, and it is right now in like a tech preview. But some of the feedback that we've gotten so far is very, very good. It's kind of funny. I saw an email the other day that said, "Hey, that new UI, I can't get it in dark mode. I love dark mode on Intersight." So one of the developers did come back and say, once the new UI becomes, in service and a production offering where someone can truly select it, yes, dark mode will be in there. But it's surprising to hear how much people love that dark mode look inside the dashboard of Intersight. Another thing that's coming up in November is an offer that we're calling Nexus Cloud. And Nexus Cloud is really a cloud-based management platform for the data center networking side of the data center. And, it is powered by Intersight, but we realize most of our customers are different buying departments for networking versus the compute and storage and virtualization folks. So we're literally offering Nexus Cloud almost like a standalone product or something like that. But the really good secret is it is running inside of Intersight. And so what this allows for the future is really for things like converged infrastructure or a full data center stack of compute, storage, and networking, both physical and virtual, to be visible and to be operated by Intersight. So we're really excited about Nexus Cloud coming in November, and we'll probably be making a big splash around that in the November timeframe. Another feature, Carol mentioned it, is that we are currently in tech preview for managing Dell and HPE rack servers that are managed through the Redfish protocol. So that's a built-in function of Intersight. And right now it's kind of like a read-only type world in this tech preview. But as we go forward, there will be full configuration and operational capabilities for third-party servers. In January, February, and March of next year, the first quarter, Intel will release their Sapphire product for their CPUs, and that will be Cisco's M7 generation of servers. And when we introduce that in our UCS X series, which is our brand new chassis, and our rack servers, Intersight is going to be a requirement to manage and operate those servers. And so we're literally putting all of our eggs in one basket of Intersight for Intel and our AMD-based rack servers in that M7 generation. And it's pretty exciting with the number of offerings that are coming out with that. I would also say that, we're not going to cover the UCS X series roadmap in this session, but I would encourage the listener to, look and see what that roadmap has to offer, because together with Intersight, UCS X series is really going to be that platform for the next 10 to 12 years we're seeing amazing market adoption. We're seeing lots of people that have rack server type of profiles come over to the UCSX series because it has an abundance of storage. And we're also seeing a lot of customers that are seeing the sustainability and the power savings from, older servers and from many rack servers by consolidating onto the UCSX series. They're seeing a better, a sustainability power budget, especially when energy prices are going up. So this has got a new big floodlight on the topic of, energy usage. And the UCSX series has got some really good beneficial business outcomes on that front. And then there's a lot of little features that are constantly coming out. And actually customers, when they use Intersight, they can actually suggest features. There's a question mark up on the top right of the screen, and there's a feedback button there. And most of the features that are coming out and that we are delivering in Intersight are based on that customer feedback and based on those customer suggestions.
So someone is listening. Well, so Carol, how do Ingram Micro partners or resellers really get started with Intersight?
First step is, for partners to reach out and speak to John or I. We'll be happy to help you get started with your Intersight practice and build that practice. We'll be happy to help you with demos and going through, how to purchase, what the best practices are around Intersight.
So as we do start to wrap up our episode, we always ask our guests the same final question, and that's, where do you see technology going in the next year? So we know that's a broad question, but within this space or anything that you're keeping an eye on, where are we headed towards 2023? John, I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, certainly. So, I'm recently just kind of listening to some industry experts, especially some of the Cisco folks. I mean, we're finding that like north of 90% of our enterprise customers and even some of our mid-market and SMB customers are moving to a hybrid cloud environment. That's something that is just happening. We saw as normal, we see kind of a flee towards the cloud. And now we were seeing a little bit of a drawback towards more of a hybrid infrastructure, whether that be edge computing, or if we're starting to look at more DevOps operations in the cloud and how we can blend that together. And what we're finding in some of the large enterprises is that almost 60% of these guys are making these moves weekly. So I think what we're seeing moving forward is that there needs to be a dynamic nature with the way that we manage infrastructure. And I think things like Kubernetes being native inside of Intersight is going to be critical for larger enterprise and mid-enterprise. DevOps as kind of a motion towards an agile development cycle is going to be very important. And just kind of leveraging Intersight, again, as a platform to cover both UCSX, Intersight, and third-party vendors is going to give people a way to give enterprises a way to look down the road and say, what do my resources look like? What do I need to make sure that my lines of business are getting serviced the way that they needed to be serviced? And then move forward from there to try to really be agile in the marketplace.
Dave, how about you?
So, together with Intersight and the UCSX series going forward, what are we going to see in the next couple of years? I think with the M7s, we're going to see, unprecedented performance application capabilities. We currently have a 100 gig end-to-end solution inside the UCSX series with 100 gig fabric interconnects. And that's pretty unique to Cisco. So from a performance perspective and a consolidation of older servers onto the UCSX series managed by Intersight, we're seeing a lot of consolidation and world records being broken all at the same time. It is the easiest management out there. One of the things that UCS was its claim to fame when we announced it back in 2009 was, was better networking for a blade chassis, but also the easiest management in the environment. And when customers see what Intersight can do as compared to some of our older tools, they will be amazed. One of the modules in Cisco Intersight is Intersight Workload Optimizer. And what that does is it basically just says, hey, we see your applications and the infrastructure that's supporting them. Let's listen to that for a little while and tell you, is it under supported from an infrastructure standpoint, meaning you need to add resources, CPU, memory, bandwidth, whatever, in order to give it the proper amount of infrastructure to serve the customer demand? Or is your infrastructure, whether it's on-prem or in the cloud, is it over-provisioned and you are spending too much money? Intersight Workload Optimizer drives for that perfect balance between cost and performance and allows customers to zero in on that perfect line that they're trying to get to. And you need something like Intersight Workload Optimizer with that AI background. It's just too complex for humans and data to calculate. So the neat thing about Intersight Workload Optimizer, it will do that job, whether the workload is in the public cloud, in Amazon, Azure, or Google, or on-prem. And you get a common tool to calculate that capability rather than disparate tools. So there's a very consistent way of measuring that performance. Another thing is, Intersight Workload Optimizer doesn't even have, we have customers that don't have one Cisco server or any Cisco hardware in their environment that are using Intersight Workload Optimizer. They're basically pointing it towards their public cloud infrastructure and letting it go to town on optimizing. So we're seeing an uptick in that use case as well. And again, in the beginning of the year, we're going to be dropping a lot of features around converged infrastructure. So as I mentioned before, Nexus Cloud is powered by Intersight. That's the network portion. Intersight already covers compute and storage, whether it's physical and virtual. And so this will allow Intersight to completely manage a converged infrastructure environment, like a FlexPod or a flash stack from Pure Storage. And we have Intersight that can use that strength of advisories to understand whether that the converged infrastructure is within spec or if it's out of spec, and then proactively alert the customer to changes that are needed. We're still looking forward to the electronic CVD that will be able to configure and manage converged infrastructure from Intersight, saving customers time and money from, reading those CVDs and then applying what they've learned in those environments. So the future's bright with Intersight, and I'm really excited about, the first half of next year with all the announcements that are coming.
Carol, how about you?
Well, I know IT departments and Cisco partners, their professional services team never have enough time to get everything done. And, we're seeing the consolidation and the consistency within dashboards such as Intersight that makes it so much easier for them to deploy, to manage and monitor the equipment. They don't have to be connecting to 4 or 5 different management platforms to see what's going on their environment. They're able to make those decisions quickly and leverage best practices, making sure that it's a secure environment and up to date.
Well, Carol, for listeners who have any questions about what we talked about today or wanted to find out more information about Intersight, how can they reach out?
They can reach out via your Ingram Micro sales rep or John or I. Any of us would be happy to help in joining into operations with your partners.
Excellent. Well, gentlemen, I appreciate the time and the insight and the conversation today. Carol, Dave, and John, thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shelby.
Thank you very much.
And thank you, listeners, for tuning in and subscribing to B2B Tech Talk with Ingram Micro. If you like this episode or have a question, please join the discussion on Twitter with the hashtag B2B Tech Talk. Until next time, I'm Shelby Skrhak.
You've been listening to B2B Tech Talk with Ingram Micro. This episode was sponsored by Ingram Micro's Imagine Next. B2B Tech Talk is a joint production with Sweetfish Media and Ingram Micro. Ingram Micro production handled by Laura Burton and Christine Fan. To not miss an episode, subscribe today on your favorite podcast platform.